You got that? So now we're going to start with prayer. Dear Jesus, thanks for bringing us together. Please open our hearts and our minds to your word and tell us always that we follow your will. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. And now, Father Chris.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. Tonight I'm going to start out with a quick explanation of CARE again, and then where it came from and what our hope is with the CARE. So CARE is an acronym, stands for Catholic Accompaniment Reflection Experience. Catholic Accompaniment Reflection Experience. And it was a funded project from the USCCB, the United States Catholic Council of Catholic Bishops. And they piloted the program in 2 dioceses. So they chose Indianapolis as one and San Francisco as the other. And so they saw a strong willingness with Catholic Relief Services and other agencies within our archdiocese, some of the accompaniment that we already were doing with Faith in Indiana and some other things. And so they saw this as a rich area to pilot this program of CARE. And so it really is a pilot program where we're kind of just discovering as we go what it's going to look like. We got the program right as COVID began to shut things down. And so originally, it was an accompaniment program where we would accompany asylum seekers or migrants or refugees into life in Indianapolis, to accompany them to court hearings in Chicago, or accompany them through the process of getting documentation and paperwork and different things like that to accompany them. Since COVID shut everything down, closed a lot of the courts, it's taken on different aspects. One of the aspects we want to focus on is still the accompaniment part. That's why Cindy Neal's here to explain some things with us tonight, but also education. The education into the asylum process, education into why people are coming to the United States looking for shelter and living. So accompaniment is going to be an education. We're going to be educating folks in that. We are forming a CARE ministry here at St. Bartholomew, and so hopefully people will be willing to get involved in that. I love the turnout we have tonight. We have a number of people online as well, so welcome our internet participants as well. But the CARE ministry is going to take on, again, the educational focus, but also a direct accompaniment of helping people who arrive here in Columbus, or maybe even host families who are in need. And then also just looking for other opportunities to serve some of God's most vulnerable people at this time. So glad you're here tonight to learn more about the unaccompanied minors in our midst, and how we may be able to help accompany them in some ways. My pleasure to introduce Cindy Neal, who's Executive Director of Bethany Christian. I think I said that right. Executive Director, or?
I'm not the director.
No, okay. She's not the director,
right.
But
yeah, a licensing specialist.
Licensing specialist at Bethany Christian, who has a contract to help the unaccompanied minors. Introduce Cindy.
It's good to be with you guys, and it's good to see people's faces and be able to gather safely in groups together. So I work for Bethany Christian Services. I have been there for 18 years, and I've been with this program serving unaccompanied children since 2019 when we first began this in Indiana. I was actually interviewed by a news agency a few weeks ago, and they changed my name to Bethany in the article. So I don't know if they're going to name an agency after me now, or I get a promotion or what, but I am not anything that official. So I will kind of preface this by saying I am a social worker, I am a mother, I love children, I'm an advocate. I'm not a immigration attorney, I'm not a policy advisor. So I do get to spend time with those people every month who have way more knowledge and experience than I do, and I'm thankful to collaborate with them. So I'm just going to share from my perspective of the children that I get to serve every day and spend my work days with, and hopefully that'll foster a good conversation and just a dialogue to better understand unaccompanied children. So Bethany Christian Service, this is our kind of vision statement motto, but we demonstrate the love and compassion of Jesus Christ by protecting children, empowering youth, and strengthening families through quality social services. So we were founded in 1944. We have more than 100 locations on 5 continents and 12 countries. Our Indianapolis branch opened in 1983, and our director, who still serves us, Linda Ressler, was there for that opening, and she is wonderful to work with and has really grown our agency to be able to serve a lot of children and families. So what Bethany is mostly known for is our adoption services. So we do provide domestic and independent adoption. We work with local foster care, so kids in the DCS system in Marion and surrounding counties. We also have pregnancy counseling. We have been working for family preservation services, just the idea that families belong together. And so if there is a family that is struggling in some areas or needs support in order to be able to keep their children, we'll come alongside them and provide them with that support. And then we've had our transitional foster care for unaccompanied children since 2019. So a little bit about unaccompanied children. Every year, thousands of children from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador make the dangerous journey to cross the border into the U.S. And by definition, unaccompanied children are children who arrive at the border without a parent or legal guardian. So these could be children traveling with their cousins, they could be traveling with other children or youth from the same country, but by definition, unaccompanied children arrive at the border with no parent or legal guardian. One thing that I always think it's so important to clarify is that it is not illegal to seek asylum in the U.S., and that is what these children are doing. That has been an international human rights law, and has been a law in our country for many years. And the only way to seek asylum is to arrive in person. You can't fill out an application, you can't do something by mail. The only way to seek asylum is to arrive in person at a U.S. border and declare that is what you're seeking. So we do see children, like I mentioned, they travel in groups, sometimes with cousins, aunts, other unrelated family members. You may hear in the news sometimes of caravans with as many as hundreds of people traveling in groups. They travel by various means, any method of transportation that you can imagine. These kids have probably experienced that, whether that's walking, riding on top of trains, hiding in the backseat of cars, traveling in buses. We got a group of children last week, and one of them was telling me about hiding in the back of a semi-truck for 27 hours across Mexico. So they travel by various methods. It can take several days or even several weeks. We actually had a 17-year-old girl in our program, and she said that the journey took her 4 months. She was traveling with 2 babies, and she said babies take a lot longer to travel with. And she also said just whenever she found a place that was safe, she stayed there as long as she could until she had to move on to the next place. Once the children arrive at the border, they are prepared and told to look for a man or woman in uniform, to look for Border Patrol, and to declare that they're seeking asylum, that they're looking to be reunited with family that's already in the U.S. So Customs and Border Patrol will take the children into custody. By law, they are only able to hold children for 72 hours. I won't get into all of the legal history and background of that, but there was a settlement that was called the Flores Agreement, and out of that, it declared that children needed to have a minimum standard of care. Things like you can't hold children indefinitely, you can't put children in holding facilities with adults. To protect children, the Flores Agreement was put into place. So after that 72 hours of being with Border Patrol, children are then transferred to the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement. We have a lot of acronyms that we use and go by. So once they enter our custody, they look to programs like Bethany's to take children in. So we have, I won't get into all the logistics, but essentially there's a database of sorts, and every day we update that and say, we have 10 beds available in Indiana for an unaccompanied child. So they look at that list every day, and then will contact us to place children. So as a transitional foster care program, I am biased because I work with it, but it really is the best for children because they are getting individual care and attention. They get a chance to just be kids. They are served well. They are able to be reunited with their sponsors quickly. Alternatives to that, when there are not enough room in transitional foster care programs, would be shelters. What we're seeing right now is very skewed. If you pay attention to the news and the current humanitarian crisis that's been going on at the border since February, children are staying in Customs and Border Patrol custody for way longer than 72 hours. Since February, they've been seeing a huge influx of children, which they expect to see through at least September. So kids are staying way longer. They also have set up a number of emergency intake shelters, many of these being on military bases or convention centers that have been turned into makeshift shelters. So these kind of timeframes are a little bit skewed right now. And unfortunately, for the kids that we're serving, we are often their second or third stop in the U.S. after they've crossed the border, which, as you can imagine, creates confusion. It's a little more challenging for them just to feel settled, to know that they're safe, that they can trust. So there are lots of reasons why children make the journey. It is, but to kind of summarize those, we see that to reunite with family in the U.S. Children who cross the border, 95% of them have a family member already living in the U.S. and settled here that they are seeking to reunite with. So it could have been a situation where maybe mom fled to the U.S. 5 or 6 years ago and didn't feel like she could travel with an infant or toddler, so left that child in home country with a grandparent or another family member. And circumstances in that country have become even more difficult, and that family member can no longer care for the child. So they may choose to send them to the United States. And one thing that we see, particularly with teenagers, is the pressure to join gangs in their home country. Kids have told us stories about, gangs hanging out around their school, even holding them by gunpoint. For girls, often the threat to become girlfriends of gang members. And all that relationship would entail. So we do see that as very prevalent. Typically situations of abuse or neglect, and also just for opportunities for safety and security. So a little bit kind of with current, what we're looking at currently, and these numbers change all the time, but just to kind of give you a little bit of a snapshot, in 2019, 81,000 children crossed the U.S.-Mexico border. So since March of 2020, the border has been closed, and it remains closed under Title 42, which is a public health measure. However, what the Biden administration has said that they would not turn away children who presented themselves at the border. So that is part of why we're seeing this influx. So in February alone, 9,000 kids crossed the border, and the Department of Homeland Security is estimating that as many as 18,000 to 22,000 could cross every month from now until September. So these are quotes from some of the kids in our program. I wish that I could show you their faces and their names and their stories, because I feel like that makes it all so more real. But we highly value the safety and protection of our children. So these are just some statements that they've made that we have had permission to share. I was forced to quit school because gangs would hang outside recruiting students. I was threatened to meet up a few times because I didn't join. When I was leaving for the U.S., gang members threatened to kill me if I ever returned to my home country. My uncle was shot and killed in front of my house by gang members while I was inside the house. My grandparents are old and barely make ends meet. Sometimes we don't have anything to eat. So I won't go too much into this, but with migration, when we talk to immigration experts, policy advisors, people that are kind of on the forefront, they talk about kind of what are the push and pull factors. So, a pull factor may be things like, I feel pulled to come to the United States because I could get a better job, or my kids could have better schooling, or maybe there's a little bit more, stability for my family. The push factors are conditions that make it so difficult or even impossible to remain where you are. So that's, things like persecution, violence, threats to yourself or your family, natural disasters. I was in Guatemala 3 years ago, right after Volcano Fuego erupted, which displaced thousands of families. In November, Central America had 2 Category 4 hurricanes within 2 weeks of each other. So these have all led to this as well. COVID hit the world hard, but it especially hit Central America. The previous administration had cut all foreign aid to that region. Additionally, most of the rest of the world doesn't have unemployment benefits or stimulus checks or food pantries. The families and people who were already fragile were put in even more desperate situations. So there was a significant rise in violence and just people doing whatever they had to do, big ends meet. So, when you hear people kind of argue or debate about immigration and say, well, they're just coming here because they want better jobs or they want this, immigration experts on all sides are saying that the trend we are seeing in recent years and now is this pushback, where people genuinely feel like they have no option to leave their home. And when I see these children, so many of them are sad to have left their home country. They didn't want to leave. They left behind their family. They left behind their friends. Some of them had to leave with only a few hours notice, so they didn't get to say goodbye. They miss their family, and they don't know what life is going to be like here. So many of the kids are very torn and have felt that, that pushback in a sense. As you can imagine, the journey is very dangerous. I have 5 children, and I get worried about them when they cross the street or want to walk a block to a friend's house. I cannot imagine my child going on a 3-week, 6-week journey through multiple countries to try to hope to get to me. So there are many dangers of this journey. As you can imagine, there is extortion. A lot of kids go days without knowing when their next meal may be. Kidnapping, all kinds of assault is very common and prevalent, either that happening to them personally or witnessing that. Trafficking is also a huge risk. There are, there's only a couple of routes that you can take to get to the border, and the people that do wish to harm others know those routes, and so it's very easy for these kids to be targeted, particularly when they don't have anyone to protect them. People also know that they're traveling through countries that are not their own, so they really don't have rights. And so we have heard of some really difficult and terrible stories that kids have experienced. If people want to hear more specifics, I'm happy to share that, but I'll keep it general, just kind of be sensitive to the audience. So once the kids arrive at the border and they are processed by Border Patrol, they do get a notice to appear in court, and their immigration case is monitored. So once the children are in the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, they remain in their custody until they're 18 years old or until they're released to a suitable sponsor or their immigration case. And then from that OR custody, they go into programs like Bethany's Transitional Foster Care Program. So ideally, we believe that children should be in the least restrictive placement, and that's why we think that the transitional foster care model is such a great model, because they're not in a shelter with 2,000 other children. They're in a home with foster parents that have been trained, who are ready to welcome them, who are ready to care for them like they're their own. They get their birthday celebrated. They get lots of special opportunities and time with them. So a little bit about transitional foster care. So the Office of Refugee Resettlement will contact us and say, we've got 10 kids to send your way. Do you have beds open? And we say yes. And those kids then arrive to Indiana within 24 to 48 hours. They do not arrive in Indiana for any geographic reason. They come here solely because we have a bed open for them. So we have had several children who have had their sponsor in the Indiana area, which has been great to be able to make that connection. But the child could be going to a sponsor in New York or North Carolina or Texas. So we keep the child with us, and then we'll make sure they get to that person safe. So the children are placed in foster homes. All of our foster homes are licensed, they're trained, they go through a very thorough process to make sure that they are ready for the blessings and challenges of caring for children. The children arrive with little to no belongings. Often they arrive only with the clothes on their back. If they traveled from their home country with a small bag of personal belongings, that is confiscated by Border Patrol, and it may or may not be returned to them. I'm on a rotation with our staff to greet kids when they arrive from the border, and I will tell you that's one of the most special moments, but also one of the most heartbreaking, because these kids are very confused. They don't know what Indiana is or why they're here. They don't know if we're safe. They don't know what's going to happen to them next. Often we are finding there is not great communication from Border Patrol, who is sending them to us, of what's happening to them. I was there and a couple months ago, we had a 10-year-old boy arrive, and he had left Border Patrol custody at 5:30 in the morning. He arrived in Indiana at 10:30 at night, and nobody told him where he was going all day. So he had no idea what was happening to him. So just to be able to stop and process with the kids. So when the kids arrive, one of the first things we do is we tell them that they're safe, and we tell them that in this country, the kids have rights, and we go through what their rights are. We'll ask the children if they know who their sponsor is, and most of the kids say yes. They'll know their mom's name, they'll have her phone number memorized, and we'll call her, and they will allow them to talk. And that phone call is one of the most beautiful moments, because that caregiver may know that that child was sent or left their home country 4 or 6 weeks ago, but they have no idea if they arrived safely or whose hands they're in. So for that phone call, for that child to be able to say, I'm safe, I'm here, and for us to say, we're gonna help you. We have had other programs have had cases with really little kids who couldn't give that information, who didn't know what their parents' names were. And so those cases are a little bit more challenging. So once kids are in our care, they go home with their foster family. We do provide several services while they're with us. So one of those is case managers. So we have staff, and their job is to identify who the child's sponsor is and make sure they are a safe person for the child to go to. So we don't want to delay that process if the child has a mother or a father or a grandmother who's ready for them. We want to get them to them as soon as possible, but we have to make sure that person is who they say they are, and we do have to make sure that person is safe for them. So the Office of Refugee Resettlement does require that sponsor to prove that they're related, maybe through birth certificates, or we can contact the consulates of those countries if we need to, but we have to make sure there's a connection. These children are considered a trafficking risk, as I mentioned earlier. We actually have had several cases in the past couple of years of trafficking. We have to make sure that person is safe for the child to go to. So the Office of Refugee Resettlement does require background checks. We're not checking for legal status. We're just making sure that there's no criminal record or anything that could endanger a child. They also have to prove that they have a safe place for the child to live. Our case manager works on that and gets the child to their sponsor as quickly as possible. And the average is about 30 to 40 days. We have had kids that we've been able to reunite in as little as 7 to 10. And then we have had some complex cases for kids that have been with us much longer. Children do receive legal support. We work with the National Immigrant Justice Center, and they meet with our kids within a couple days of arrival. They explain what the immigration process is, what the notice to appear in court means. They've come up with this really great way of explaining immigration like a soccer game, because all of the kids understand that. So they explain, you're on this team, and the court is on this team, and the judge is your referee, and your lawyer is your coach, and you can win without your coach, but it really helps to have one. So, and then they just play soccer. But the kids do get legal support. If the kids stay in the Indiana area or in the Chicago Immigration Court region, which covers a few states, our attorneys will continue to represent them. If the child goes to a sponsor in another state, then they'll refer them out for legal services. Our kids do get medical care as well. They are seen at a bilingual medical clinic to make sure there's no pressing health concerns or needs, to get them updated on vaccinations, to just make any notes of treatment they may need. The kids also receive therapy. Every week the kids get individual and group counseling, and we have found that is so important. As I mentioned before, a lot of the kids are confused. They've had a difficult process just to get here. And while that may be exciting and beautiful to think about being reunited with their mom, maybe they haven't seen her in 5 or 6 years. Maybe they don't know what life's going to be like if they, once they're living with mom. We have a 13-year-old boy, and we just submitted his case to be released. And he's just really nervous. He doesn't speak English. He doesn't know what his next school will be like. He doesn't know if he'll have friends. And so to have therapists on staff that are able to work through those questions and issues with kids. And we also provide kids with education. We actually run our own school site for kids, and we do that for multiple reasons. One is they need a fully bilingual education. They need to be taught in their native language first. We also need a setting that's therapeutic. A lot of the kids have had significant gaps in their education. We've had kids that it was not safe for them to go to school because of local gangs, and so maybe they've missed 6 months of school or 2 years of school. And so to throw them into an American middle school or high school and expect them to succeed would be really rep for them. So our teacher does an academic assessment with them to help determine what grade level they're at, and she creates a curriculum just for them. With our school setting, it is like I mentioned, it's therapeutic, so the kids get breaks during the day. Our teacher has done a lot of study on just trauma and impact on brain. The brain development is some of the important, making sure kids' needs are met. So because a lot of the kids have food insecurity, we have a snack bin, so the kids are always know what is available for food and what they can have. They have, fidget things on their desks and on their chairs that if they get nervous, they can use. If they're having a hard day or got disappointing news about their case, they can step out of the classroom and meet with our counselor whose door is next door. And so it's a very safe kind of entrance to being here. And a lot of the goal is really just to get the kids regulated, to get them used to a routine. Don't have visits or bullies, just get the kids kind of settled and feeling stabilized. Our teacher then is able to make notes and observations, which she can pass along for the child when they are registered into a local school after they're reunified. So one thing that's important to note with this foster care program is that it is reunification only. Adoption is never an option. So with regular foster care in your county, DCS and local judges do have the authority to terminate parental rights. The Office of Refugee Resettlement does not have that. So these kids are only to be reunified, and that's the goal. So foster parents with this program know that. So these kids have families, and our job is to keep them safe and get them to those families as soon as we can. So if a sponsor is not located or available, there are a couple options for kids. One is a long-term foster care program. And we currently don't have that in Indiana, but we really, really want it. So we're hopeful for the future. So that would be if a child is, so situations where a sponsor has not been available. We have had kids where maybe the family member that they were being sent to has been deported or is not in a position to care for a child. They didn't know the child was coming, isn't ready for them. And so with those cases, what we would do is we would talk to the child. We would also talk to their family and home country and see what their wishes are. So the two options would be going to a long-term foster care program. So they would continue to live with a foster family, but they would be able to attend a local school. They would have a social worker to kind of help assimilate them to life in the U.S. And an attorney would continue to work on their behalf and see what their legal relief options. They may be able to qualify for a special immigrant juvenile status or a trafficking visa or asylum. The other option would be for them to be returned to home country. So we would always follow the child's wishes and that of their family and home country. If it is not safe for them to return, then the sponsor would likely prefer for them to remain in a long-term program. So there are group homes or residential facilities for these kids, but long-term foster families are great and something that we hope to be able to do in the future. So a little bit about our kids. So I'll share this painting. This was actually made by a local artist in Indiana who was inspired by our kids, and he calls this 5,000 blessings. So it's off of the idea that sometimes in the immigration debate, people are worried about what if there's not enough to come around, and what if there aren't enough resources? We have so many needs in our own country. But when you look at the miracle of Jesus and multiplying the bread and the fish, people looked around and they were worried that there wasn't enough to go around, but they trusted in Jesus and he multiplied and all were able to be fed and cared for. So that painting hangs in our office and is a reminder of that. So I will share some ways to get involved and some things to do, and I'd love to, and then we can open up for questions and for more conversation. One thing I would say that's not on this list, hands down, but is always our greatest need is foster families. And I did not put that on the list because right now we are only able to have foster families in the Indianapolis area because the kids receive their services there Monday through Friday, so we have to have families in that area. So I'm mentioning it to you just in case you have family or friends in Indianapolis or know of people that may be interested. And foster families are, we couldn't do this program without them. So for them to open their homes and welcome in 2-3 children who They don't know their background, they don't know their story, but to welcome them in, to treat them as their own. We have one family that's taken 20 children in 1 year. And as soon as one leaves and is reunified, they say, we're ready for another. And they're amazing with these kids. They put together a little photo album for each one of them when they leave. So when that child goes to their sponsor, they can share all about their moments they had in Indiana. So that is our number one need. We've currently been serving 18 kids at a time, and we just got approved a couple weeks ago to serve 30. So that means we will need more families to be able to serve 30 kids. So we're thankful for the opportunity, but that creates a lot of need for us as well. So in addition to fostering, just praying for the kids. What they see, what they encounter, what they experience is so challenging, and it's just things that are hard to imagine from the eyes of children. And what often breaks my heart too is just not only what they've experienced in their home country, but then how they're treated once they arrive at the border. And I participate in conference calls with Border Patrol. I think they have a really hard job. I think there's a lot of Border Patrol agents that do their job with respect and dignity, but there are also some that abuse their power and mistreat children and cause further trauma, which is just not acceptable. And so when I hear those stories from children of being mistreated, of their items being taken from them, of hurtful comments that are yelled at them or made at them, that really breaks my heart. So just to pray for them that they would have peace, that God would protect them, and that they would trust in His gift. So we do often need volunteers and support for foster families. So I know that Indianapolis is a little bit of a commute, but if people are ever able to come in that area and help with children, that is great. We use volunteers in our classroom setting. If we have consistent volunteers and people that really get a chance to know children, we may be able to have more opportunities for them. For example, like accompanying children. So if we have a child that needs to travel to New York or California, we look for people to travel with them and make sure they get there safely. Support for foster parents. As I mentioned, like we can't do this program without them, but they are tired. And so just even having gift cards for them to grab at dinner, or people that may be willing to, watch a child on a Saturday afternoon and give a foster family a break for a few hours. Any volunteers that work directly with children do have to have background clearances run and some training just to make sure that they're safe for these kids to be around, but that is great. And even little things to encourage foster families. We had a church once donate a little flowers and a Starbucks gift card to all of our foster parents, and one of them just broke down in tears because she, just to feel noticed, and that somebody that she didn't even know appreciated what she was doing and wanted to give her a little smile that day. The other is collecting donations for children in the program. Their foster parents are given money to buy children clothing and personal belongings, which then belong to that child. They get to take them with them. But that first couple days are a little bit rough for kids. I mentioned they come with just clothes on their back. And while the foster parents may know that they've got a 5-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl, that doesn't always mean that they know what sizes they are. And so to have things on hand that we can give them, they often arrive late at night. I don't know why these the Office of Refugee or something that gets these flights, but they almost always arrive really late at night and they're tired and exhausted. And so to have a bag of nice, clean things to hand them is wonderful. And I actually just met earlier this afternoon with a woman at a local church who puts bags like this together for kids in regular foster care. So it was great to hear her ideas and what she's doing here and to come up with ways to partner. Classroom supplies too. Our teacher is always looking to do creative art projects and have fun things on hand for kids. So she has kind of a wish list of items she would need. One thing as well is that we don't have our Spanish Bibles or Catholic prayer books. In our program, children are allowed to worship or not worship however they choose. We do not force any kind of beliefs upon them. But these children amaze me with their faith. And I think that could be really meaningful to them. There was a little 8-year-old girl who was upset because Border Patrol took her Bible. And they did give it back to her. We got it back in our office, and it was in a sealed, crime evidence police bag. And, I said to her, well, even if they didn't give it back, we could have found another one for you. And she said, oh no, that one has my notes from Sunday school in it. So she wanted that Bible, and we were glad that she got that back. But that would be very meaningful to be able to have to give to the kids that choose that. And just so many other stories of faith. We had an 8-year-old girl who had been kidnapped and experienced so many difficult things on her way to the U.S. And I just looked at her and I said, "How did you make it?" And she said that her grandma was the one who sent her. Her grandma knew that she couldn't protect her from the gangs any longer. And the grandmother told her that every day she needed to pray that God would make her brave. And so she said, "That's what I did. Every morning when I got up, I prayed that God would make me brave for that day." So their faith just amazes me. One thing that I'm already in conversation with your church about that I'm really excited about is providing opportunities for the children. I have tried to get this added to my job title, and it has not been approved, but I would like to be the fun coordinator. So these kids have experienced so many hard things, and we cannot take those away. We can't take away those hard memories, but we can try to fill them with as many fun, welcome, loving moments possible. And our kids range from all ages. Prior to COVID, I would say our average age was 6 to 10 years old. But in recent months, we've had everything from 1-year-olds to 17-year-olds. We really have the whole spectrum. But when I think back, kind of that 6 to 10-year-old that when we're seeing the most of, that's where most of my memory is kind of started in my life. And so to know that we have a role in being some of their first memories in the U.S. and filling those with fun. And so, and finding creative ways to do it, because the government has a lot of rules around our program, but being able to take children to parks, to playgrounds, to museums, to get them treats. We had a local El Salvadoran restaurant in Indianapolis that had our kids over for a cooking class. It was so fun because we made foods that they were familiar with, and kids were all in the kitchen, and they were sharing stories of their favorite foods from their home country and what they missed the most. And the owners gave them ice cream and soda, and it was just great. And the owners kind of shared their story of, leaving behind their home country, but still being proud of where they came from and being able to be present where they are. And there was one girl who noticed their menu. She was reading their menu real closely, and she noticed they had like this favorite soup that her grandma always made. And she said, "I'm going to come back here and eat that soup." And one of the boys said, "Well, you don't know. You could get released from the program before that. How do you know?" And she said, "I have faith I'm going to come and eat that soup." So she got her soup that week. So, but just to have things that are familiar with them. So I've been talking with your church about sponsoring a field trip for the kids next month. And so we're really excited about that. And the great thing about our program is that we're always getting new kids in. So even if we do something one time and it's really fun, it's really fun to do it again 4 months later, because we could have totally different kids in our program. So I'm excited about that. I would say, if anything else, I think one of the most important things is just to continue to learn about these issues and inform those around you with accurate information. I have been in so many conversations at school gatherings or with friends or family, and I think there's just a lot of misconceptions out there on immigration. I think in recent years it's become, very politicized and even fear-inducing, and to know that these are just kids at the end of the day. These are just families. I think it's really easy to try to discount people's stories if you can't relate to them. I don't know how many times I've had mothers, say to me, "Well, I could never do that. I could never send my child, away across countries to try to get to me." And I just think, how difficult that had to be for that mother. We've never been in that position. I've never been in that position where I had no other choice, where that was the safest choice. The safest choice being the unknown risk rather than the imminent known danger. And so to try to have empathy and just be able to understand. And I would say also for those that feel led to advocate with your government leaders on behalf of asylum seekers. This is a big political issue that I think is still being wrestled with statewide, nationally. And so to advocate on behalf of these children and their families. I think it is okay to want safe borders, to want a fair immigration process, and to still recognize that these are humans and all they're asking for is protection. And so to honor that. So I'd love to answer questions or just kind of continue the conversation. So as I mentioned, our program is, we do serve 18 kids at a time. We'll serve 30 hopefully by the summer. And since we started, we've had, I believe, 111 kids come through. And I will tell you, when I look at those numbers and see 81,000 or 18,000, it feels very small what we've done. But then when we have a wall at our office with pictures of every child we're going to be. We have a big heart mural that says, that they stay in our hearts. And I look at those faces and I look at those names and I think of those sponsors and know that every one of those numbers matter. And that it takes our program and it takes dozens of others that are making a difference. But for each of those kids that we've served and their families, that
said before, now having foster families here amongst the thought that we here.
Yes, so, and unfortunately, our office is not only in Indianapolis, but it's on the north side, so, as far as we get from Columbus. So, if we are granted a long-term, then we would be able to place children outside of Indianapolis. The only clincher is that we would have to make sure that the juvenile courts in that county were supportive of immigration, because the kids would have to work with that local court. They would be dealing with immigration court, but they would also be dealing with local. So as long as it was a county that was favorable towards immigration, we could look to these kids there. And we don't have that program, but we really hope to. And that is still a reunification program only. Those kids are not available for adoption, but they could be with the foster family for 4, 5, 6 years. And so that really becomes an extension of family to them and somebody that child will go to as they get settled into independent living in the U.S. Oh, yeah.
So, in order to help in your school, how can we help?
Sure.
In your, going to your school, but can you speak Spanish?
Wonderful. So I have business cards that I'd love to connect you individually. So volunteers do have to have background clearances, and we ask for volunteers that can be committed just for the reason of these kids are already confused a lot and they're having to say goodbye a lot. And so we don't want to make that more difficult. But if we knew that you could come once a month or twice a month or something. So because one of the challenges we have in our classroom is that we have kids in there from age 5 to 17. So kids who are 4 and under don't go to school, they stay home with their foster family. But with 5 to 17, that's a huge range of education level, that's a huge range of interests. And so to be able to pull kids out and do a reading group with, older kids while littler kids are doing something. Also, we have had people that have wanted to just come and volunteer and use a particular gift that they have. So for example, our teacher is coming and doing lessons with our kids, and she did a really beautiful one. They did watercolor paintings of cactus, and they talked about how cactus can thrive even in very harsh conditions, and what does that mean for us to be able to thrive where we're at. We have a breakdance teacher that comes and does breakdance lessons, and that is fun. The kids look forward to it. They clear the desk, they make the dance floor ready. They're practicing in their foster homes, moving furniture around so they can sit on their heads. That's very fun. So we have a music teacher that's wanted to come in. So whatever if you have a particular area of interest or a specialty, we welcome that. And especially being a Spanish speaker, that helps a lot.
These kids go to the public school, or is student you have there for them?
Right, so the question is about schooling for the kids. So they do not go to public. We run our own school site for them for some reasons I shared a little bit earlier, but just because we want it to be appropriate for their age level. We have kids that are on target for their grade, but then we also have kids who have never held a pencil or who have been out of school for 2 or 3 years. So, and they're with us such a short time too. So they go to a school site that we run. So we have a licensed ESL teacher who is amazing. She deals with a lot of challenging things from kiddos, and she handles it with grace and loves them all, and make sure that their stay is as safe and comfortable as possible. So we run our own school site. Oh, yeah,
So the sponsors could be in any other state, correct?
correct. Mhm.
They could go to Utah.
Right, yeah. So what we do, so they're coming here only because we have a bed available, not for any geographic reason. If our Border Patrol and the Office of Refugee Resettlement wasn't so overwhelmed and inundated, maybe they could come up with a more regional approach to it, but they just send them wherever there's a space for them. So if their sponsor is, and regardless of what city or state their sponsor is in, once we've cleared that they're a safe person for that child, they're allowed to talk to them on the phone every day. And we think that that's really important to help kind of build that relationship and help the child feel comfortable. Sometimes our counselors will help with those phone calls if it's, if it's maybe they aren't familiar with each other or need support. So if their sponsor, once we've gone through all the steps to release the child to their sponsor and the Office of Refugee Resettlement has approved it, we will then get the child to their sponsor. So if they live close to Indiana, we've had kids that have gone to Chicago or Cincinnati, their sponsor may choose to come to Indianapolis to pick them up, but otherwise we're responsible for transporting. So we will fly with that child to meet their sponsor. It is normally not my job, but a couple of months ago, our case managers were really overwhelmed. I think in 1 week, one of ours had been to California, New York, and Texas. And so there was another girl that was ready to be released, and I said, I'll travel with her. So I got to travel with a 13-year-old girl, and it was so sweet. The whole flight, she squeezed my arm, and she kept saying, I'm so nervous, but I'm so excited, but I'm so nervous, but I'm so excited. And it was so sweet. So she was 13 years old. She was walking home from school in El Salvador and was held by gunpoint by a gang that told her that she had 2 days and 2 choices. One choice was to willingly become their girlfriend and all that entails. If she refused, then they would force her. And so she came home and told her mother that, and her mom said, we've got to get you out before 2 days. So her mom had a sister who was in the US who said, I'll take her. Hired Coyote. This girl traveled in the backseat of a car for 15 days and ended up at the border. A month later, she ended up in our program, and then 2 weeks later, I was able to travel with her. And the moment she and that aunt saw each other in the airport, they both just started crying and hugging, and it was so beautiful to get to witness. And I actually keep like a little photo album of all those reunifications because that's what keeps us going. We have so many times where we have disappointing news that we have to give kids, or we just have really hard kids to work with because of all they're going through emotionally. But when I remember those moments, that's what it makes it worth it for all of us. So that's what our staff goes back to. So we'll get them to that sponsor. Okay. Sure. Yeah, so Bethany is a private Christian agency. So we are this is a contract. So the Office of Refugee Resettlement, they contract out all of their refugee children programming either to the USCCB or to the Lutheran Refugee and Immigration Services. And so it's funded through those ways. So I actually, being a Christian, I actually think it's really interesting that that's what the government has looked to historically to care for children, is the Catholic Church Social Services and the Lutheran Church Social Services. So we do receive federal funding that the ORR gives to USCCB, which then designates our program. I will say that the funding covers all of the needs, but is very limited. I will say under the previous administration, our funding was often threatened to be cut. I think things are a little bit more stable now, but that is how we're funded. But we still do rely on donations for items like for the kids. We get creative with it. So like we transport the children in vans to doctor's appointment, and we have to log every mile that we drive, every gas receipt. We have to log everything. But we found that there's a McDonald's on the way home from the doctor, so we can stop and get an ice cream cone, and the government won't raise their eyes at us for that. So we've gotten a little creative with it, but it is funded federally. I will say that programs like ours receive the least amount of funding as opposed to these emergency intake shelters. And I think that's something that is being addressed right now at a federal level, is what is a better level of care? Because these emergency intake shelters are private run, generally for-profit prison companies, and they are not licensed in the state that they're operating in. And so there are very few regulations and policies that they have to go by for the standard of care children receive. So I would like to see the government move towards a model of more child-centered care than putting kids in these shelters with 2,000 to 4,000 other children. We could, yes. And we actually do have somebody on staff whose job is like fundraising and for all of our programs, whether it's pregnancy counseling or foster care. So we do have somebody that does that. We recently applied for a grant to get a playground for our kids and didn't get it. So we're still hopeful to look for opportunities like that for things for our kids. So we are always looking. And I will say too, when we first started our program in Indiana 2 years ago, we were told to keep a very low profile because there are some cities that have this program where it's not been well received. 3 years ago in Michigan, there was programs like this that were being protested, that kids were being spit on. And so we revised to keep a very low profile. The challenge with doing that was that nobody knew what we were doing and we didn't have enough foster families. And so when I came in, we had 2 foster families. And so we were having to turn away kids every week. And that was very heart-wrenching to do. So we have been able to grow. We have been able to receive a lot of positive support, so much so that we can expand, and we're thankful for that. Other cities have been asked to take this program, and they've said no, that they don't want these kids. This is very sad to think about. So we do have some good support as far as people, believing in the work that we're doing, but we're always looking for creative opportunities to better care for the kids. Yes. Yeah, that's a great question about the language that the kids are speaking. So I would say 111 kids, I would say all but maybe 3 of them were Spanish speakers. And the ones that were not were Mayan from Guatemala and spoke a local Mayan dialect. We did have of those few, they had some familiarity with Spanish, but the Mayan dialects are really difficult and that they're very regional. And so it may be a language that only like 400 people speak. So our teacher is creative and able to still work with them. And we do use like translation services, especially with their sponsors, so they understand the process that's needed. But most of the kids are Spanish speakers. Some have a little bit of English, but not much. The Spanish is the main. Yeah.
Maybe the process and they need and allow us to speak Spanish also.
Sure. So about foster families and their language. So I would say right now we're probably at, maybe close to half of our foster families having some Spanish, which is ideal. But our number one goal is to find safe and suitable homes for children. So we will not disqualify you just because of the language. If you can give a safe home to a child, then and you are willing to go through this process of training and interviews to get there, then would love to place a child with you. All of our children and foster families have access 24/7 to a case manager or clinician who does speak Spanish. So if a child is upset or and the foster family can't understand it, they have a number that they can call. One of our first little boys that we had was crying, was like really upset at night and kept saying the same thing again, and the foster family could not understand him. So they thought that he was hurt or sick, and so they called our case manager, and it turned out that he just wanted more ice cream, that was his emergency. But we've got that service available. I will say we did have one boy complain because his foster family was from Colombia and were native Spanish speakers, and he said his English was not getting any better because they only speak Spanish. So the language helps, and all of our staff that works directly with the kids, our attorneys, our medical providers, they're all Spanish speakers. And we would love people that can, speak Spanish and help foster families too, especially if it's somebody that's willing to volunteer with kids. That makes that transition easier. So, and we do have Spanish resources for the non-Spanish speakers. Google Translate is amazing. I use that all the time. I'm not very technologically savvy, but people that have like Google or Alexa at home can actually use that to translate. And so people have gotten really creative, and it's been fun to see families grow in their Spanish. We encourage families too to find ways to incorporate the culture. There's several Central American restaurants in Indianapolis. Prior to COVID, there was a couple of big Latino festivals in Indiana in September and October that families would take kids to. So we do encourage them to, find ways to incorporate the. Yep. So the question is about sponsors. So statistically, 95% of kids that cross do have a family member in the U.S. So that is a very large number. So the majority of them have somebody they are going to. If that sponsor is not documented and doesn't have legal status, then what we encourage that person to do is to make a safety plan and to list an alternative sponsor so that if anything were to happen to them, that they could have a say in what would happen to their child. For that small, like 5% that doesn't have a sponsor, I had shared a little bit previously, but just to summarize, their options are to be in a long-term foster care program where an attorney would see what their legal relief options are, or they could be returned to home country if that's what the child and their family wishes. They would actually have to appear in immigration court and choose that, or ask the judge to make that. So both. So we get government funding, which covers, kind of the standard of care that kids receive. So other things above and beyond that, we welcome, whether it's through like churches or individual donors, and things like that allow us to give the kids like special opportunities. We had a company that donated like passes for the kids to go to the zoo, and so things like that we welcome. But also like other donations we can use too. So I'm happy to talk with people more about that. Sure, yeah. I mean, and sometimes when we get things like that, we will just decide as a staff what the greatest need is. So whether it's, that we want to bless a foster family with a gift card for dinner, or whether there's a child that's been through something really hard and we want to have a celebration for them at school or something. So we as a staff would decide how to best use that. We got an Amazon gift card several weeks ago, and so I said to our teacher and our counselor, I said, whatever you want the most to use with these children, that's for you. So but we always want the kids to have their needs met and to have to feel welcome, to feel welcome here. So so the question kind of about guardianship and care for the child. So I think I forgot to answer this before, but once the child is reunited with their sponsor, we do a 30-day follow-up. So we do kind of check in with them and see how things are going. If the child has, or the family seems to have any specific needs, when we release them, we can put a clause in it for them to receive post-release services. So for example, we have a teenage girl right now that has a heart condition. And so part of her being released is that the government will provide and ensure that she gets the medical care she needs and that her sponsor knows how to care for her medical needs. If it's a family that maybe needs counseling or wouldn't have access to an attorney, then we can put that into their release plan. So once they're released, honestly, and I'll say this is the hard part for me, once they're released, like our role with them has ended. They are allowed to keep contact with us when they do, but also they needed their time to settle as a family, and they already have so many people they're answering to that we don't want to be just one more of those. So by contract, we're actually not able to initiate contact with them past that 30 days, but they're welcome to initiate that with us back. And several of the families do keep in touch with their foster family We had a little boy that was reunited in Indianapolis, so his family was there. And there was another little boy in our program that was getting ready to leave to be reunited with his sponsor. And we had a going away party, and that boy came back to see his friend. So we do try to keep those connections. So once they're released to their guardian, it will depend on what their legal status is. So if they have permanent status, then it's very easy for them to add the child onto that. If they don't, then it's a little bit more complicated. I am not an immigration expert, but I've learned a lot about immigration in the past few years and keep learning more. But the immigration system has been very backlogged. Even prior to COVID, I think that they were about 5 million cases behind. The court dates were often taking 3, 4, 5 years. I didn't know this before I had this role, but immigration courts are the only court in our country that's under the administrative branch. And so whoever the head office in every branch down affects that immigration court. So I know that under the previous administration, it was very hard to get asylum. They statistically moved from where 90% of cases were approved to 90% of cases being automatically denied. And immigration judges actually had a quota that they had to deny that many. And if they did not, then their job was at risk. And so immigration judges actually went on strike several times because they said, we can't do our job ethically if you're giving us numbers to have to just deny. And so the immigration process is very difficult. I know immigration reform is a huge topic of conversation. Also, by law, immigrants or people seeking asylum do not have the right to an attorney. One is not provided for them, so they need one. They don't have the right. So there are several pro bono attorneys that do this, which is wonderful and amazing. But unlike for U.S. citizens, where you have the right to an attorney, they don't. And kids as young as 18 months old have been expected to represent themselves in court without an attorney. You can imagine how those cases go. I actually saw one with a 4-year-old boy who had a translation, headset on, and the judge said, do you know why you're here? No. Do you know what an attorney is? No. Do you have one? No. So those cases don't really go very well. So I know there's a lot of talk about immigration reform. There's bills that are being proposed. I think it's a very complex system. It's going to take a lot of thinking through. So that's kind of the unfortunate part. But I will say is that we don't always know how the story ends. All we know is that they're together. And so we hope that they get a fair chance to stay in the U.S., especially in these situations where their lives are threatened. But that fate is in the hands of the court. Yep.
If it's not possible, every way.
Sure. So I have cards here, but for those who are online, my email is cneal, CN as in Nancy, EAL @bethany.org. So they can contact me, and I'd be happy to talk about that. So we have kind of different groups of foster families, and that's who I work most closely with is foster families. So we have some that have lots of family and friends in town. We have, 7 or 8 foster families that go to the same church, that live in the same neighborhood. So they have these great support systems. But then we have some that just don't. We have a woman in her 70s who is an empty nester and widowed and just missed the sound of little children in the home. And so she's a foster parent. But I will tell you that when the weekend comes around, she needs a break and she's a little tired. We have a few single people who foster who sometimes have work meetings pop up or things like that. And kids love exploring. They love new opportunities. So I realize like Columbus and Indy, there's a little bit of a distance, but if there was a Saturday or a Sunday where a foster parent needed a break for the day and somebody had gone through the clearances and training and could take a child for 2, 4, 5 hours, take them to a movie, take them to a playground, buy them ice cream, show them different parts of town, that's great. So we're happy to connect with especially those foster families that need it. And with foster parents, there is, not just for this program, but kind of across the board, there is a very high burnout rate. And so one of my heart is just to keep those foster families to be able to keep serving in that role. So to give them breaks when they need it, but they are serving a very demanding and unique role. So if we can keep them encouraged to keep doing that, that is wonderful. We're right now we're kind of hitting summer and we have several foster families that are going on vacation or that need breaks, and We're not sure how it's going to work to care for all these kiddos, but we will trust God with that and hope for more people to come alongside us. Sure. So our website is www.bethany.org. And there's information on there on all of our programs in Indiana and around the world. That is a great one. I would say also check the National Immigrant Justice Center. They're our legal partner, and they actually have like you can sign up to get legal updates or ways to advocate with your local officials. I would say also like look to Catholic Charities, like they're doing great work with their C.A.R.E program. They also in Indianapolis do like some refugee resettlement work, and so they've got some great resources as well. I also know that Catholic Charities has some work going on on the ground in some of these countries. I'm trying to help kind of the reasons why people are leaving and create more stability for families and country. I know they work in Guatemala. I'm not sure what other countries they may have a presence in.
Related with the other question, if anyone who volunteers, even for 1 hour, 2 hours with this, like take them to the park or have their ice cream, do we need to do a background check, the same thing?
So what we have may be a little bit different from like what the Catholic Church has, but it's similar. I mean, so you do have to have, anytime you would be alone with a foster child without a foster parent or staff person present, you have to be cleared. Because these children are under federal custody, there's a lot more rules and restrictions around them. And while it may be cumbersome for a volunteer, it is for the safety and protection of children and for you as well to be a responsible caregiver. So it's not too cumbersome. We can walk you all through it, but it's just a couple of background checks and then a couple of online clearances, a couple of online trainings. And most people can get all those done within a couple of weeks. So, but it is a commitment, but we have to take the safety of the kids very seriously.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I handed out some of these forms for, this was really inspirational and pulls at your heart. And so Karen and Father and I and other people in the care ministry want to thank you. See things happen, to give, to help. And so we've put down a few sections you can pick in ways of helping, like monetary donations or peer mentoring, transportation, maybe even the foster babysitting. We have this for you, so fill it out and give it to us, and you'll be hearing from either Karen or myself. And then there's a box that says other. So if something struck you that we didn't think of, please write it down so we can do things to, help our brothers and sisters in Christ so they're not alone. And any questions for me, I guess? Father will end us.
Thank you, Cindy, for your very lots of things to think about. As we conclude tonight, we're just kind of brainstorm a little bit what we could do here. St. Bartholomew, we have talked about a lot of different ways, volunteering, collections, prayer, obviously. We can start that right now. But in our prayers of the faithful and other ways we can pray, obviously. Are there any other things that we want to do as folks of our community, things that we think we should do right away? Is one senior project who's going to do a collection in August. Probably Menifee is going to organize that. Maybe we can do another one earlier than that.
I'm here from the Presbyterian Church, and we have started working with Cindy. And if there's any way we can partner, anything you're doing and rather than us duplicating it. That would be a good thing.
Thank you for being here. Good to see you. So we have a member and present for those who are online from the Presbyterian Church, from Felipe Martinez's church, terrific, and has also begun working with Cindy. So partnering with the First Presbyterian would be. Thank you. Okay, one very good idea to ask the Latino community from our church to be part of our conversation, helping.
We have a lot of
Terrific, yes.
Spanish.
Presentation to help volunteer. 2 members of our Latino community right here, very active and involved, so maybe help us get that done. Got it. We could do a fundraiser to try and get them a playground. Get that done.
And I will say, we do, like, the kids do get physical activity every day, so we take them for walks, so we can drive sometimes to playgrounds, but if it's rainy or if the kids just need like 10 minutes to run outside and get the wiggles out, like, it would be great to have something on site for them that they could use. So that's kind of our goal, is to have something right on site instead of having to drive 10 or 15 minutes to a park. So, yeah.
Father Clem.
Given that Columbus has amenities that are kind of unique, I think it's a climber and the commons, Columbus Children's Museum. Perhaps if there were sponsors out here, or some of us who were sponsors out here, that could be a great day of respite for sponsor families up and off. People out here.
Yeah, we have had that idea in Indianapolis, like kind of like a foster parents night out. So, you know, they can drop the kids off for 2-3 hours, go get coffee, get a date night, or something like that. We just have to make sure that there's like people that are present with the children, just to monitor that.
Just for those online, Father Clem's idea was to sponsors here to host as a respite for foster care. Since there's so many unique amenities here in Columbus, the playgrounds, perhaps we host them down here for families. All right.
Father Chris, we are planning with Cindy on July 16th, right, Kathy? Bring the kids here and have some activities. We are going to organize this activity for July 16th, a Friday. So I let the community know and wants to help in way, money, helping, I don't know, transportation.
Karen reminded us that on July 16th, we're going to host the children here in Columbus. So volunteers or donations or anything will be greatly appreciated. More information will come out through the CARE ministry, how you might be able to help I-6 those children.
For even transportation drivers, we have to be
Clear, like background clear, yeah. People that provide transportation.
Spends time.
Yeah, and if you drive them, then we have to have a copy of your driver's license too. So lots of kind of guidelines and safety that all for the protection of kids. And I shared, kind of the very daunting reality and the situations their kids are coming from. But I will say at the end of the day, these kids are kids. And so, they're very unique because they've been through hard things, but they're still little kids. So we had a 13-year-old boy who drove a tractor trailer in his home country, but he still fell asleep with a stuffed animal every night. And so while they've endured hard things, they are just kids. I have shared this story with some people here, but we had a it's fun just to see them learn, adjust to life in the US. We had some boys that were in the bathroom and they couldn't get the paper towel dispenser to work, those automatic ones. And one of the boys said, I think you have to tell it thank you in English and then it will give you the towels. And there was like 4 boys and they all said, thank you, and raised their hands, and the towels just kept pouring out. So we have a lot of like fun moments with them, just learning and adjusting to life in the US. So they are a lot of fun. I have loved everyone. There have been a few that we, took a good rest after they left. But I was telling Father Chris, we had a little girl yesterday, she was on the phone with her mom, her sponsor, and as she's on, the 6-year-old girl just kind of rolling her eyes and like, come on, and we got off the phone and she said, what was that about? And she said, that woman is so bossy. And I'm like, well, she's your mom. So these kids are just kids. So they are fun and we have lots of laughs. I will say for any volunteers or people that are around them, we just really want to be sensitive to the kids. It is fine to ask them their favorite color or what they like to eat, but not to ask personal questions. I took some kids to a doctor's appointment a few weeks ago, and the people were really nosy, and they were asking the kids, why are you with your parents? Or why are you here? And why do you have this baby? And just things that kids should not have to answer to people that they don't know. So we just would ask volunteers to be very sensitive. We're also not allowed to have any photos of kids taken for their own privacy and protection, especially things that could be posted anywhere. Immigration courts have actually pulled information off of social media and off of online. So we will have a few kind of guidelines we'll have to have just around the kids to make sure that their time is enjoyable and fun, and also to make sure that they're.
We're getting close to 8 o'clock, and so the forms that were passed out, if you'd like to fill those out and give us some information to be part of the CARE committee here. We will follow up with you on your desire for how you might be able to help become involved. We are going to do this once a month, have a CARE meeting with hopefully some kind of a presentation educationally, and then also actions items at the end, so how we continue to help support some of these most vulnerable. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for being with us online. Why don't we end with Our Father? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses. Forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Amen. Have a safe evening. Thank you.